Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a pretty big topic, what our source calls America's quintessential leaders.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, how do you even narrow it down? So many influential people in U.S. history.
Exactly. Picking just a few feels almost impossible.
Oh.
But that's our mission for this deep dive. We're digging into one specific source that actually does try to zero in on five figures often seen as, well, the most influential.
Right. And what we want to do is give you a pretty concise but still thorough look at their main contributions.
Sort of a shortcut.
Kind of, yeah. A shortcut to understanding their legacy, why they mattered so much, and frankly, why they still matter today. Their actions really echo through American history.
Okay, let's get into it then. So the source picks five pivotal figures. And naturally, it starts with, well, the architect himself, George Washington.
Makes sense. First president, key figure in the Revolution, laid that early groundwork.
Absolutely. But what specific angle does the source take on his contribution? What makes it stand out?
Well, what the source really zooms in on is that Washington's leadership went beyond just, winning the war or being the first guy in the job. It highlights his deliberate choice not to run for a third term. That seems standard now, maybe, but back then, huge deal.
Right, everyone expected him to stay.
Exactly. So it wasn't just about a peaceful handover of power. The source argues it was this conscious, really unprecedented rejection of the whole European monarch idea. He was actively carving out America's unique Republican identity, pushing against how power worked everywhere else at the time.
That's a great point. Establishing that Republican power was so critical. Okay, so building on that, the source brings up Thomas Jefferson next, author of the Declaration, third president.
And often remembered for the Louisiana Purchase, right?
Yeah.
Doubling the country's size.
Yeah, that's the big headline. But the source suggests there's more complexity there.
Oh, definitely. The source points out this inherent paradox in Jefferson's vision. Yes, the Louisiana Purchase was, strategically, a masterstroke for expansion.
No question.
But at the same time, it immediately kicked off these massive debates about slavery's future in those new territories. It even kind of challenged his own ideas about an agrarian society.
So it forced the country to face its own contradictions early on.
Right from the start, a nation founded on liberty had to grapple with this deep internal conflict spurred by that very expansion.
So from expanding outwards, the story then turns inwards to a point where the Union itself was on the brink. And that brings us to Abraham Lincoln.
Our 16th president, guiding the country through its absolute darkest hour, the Civil War. The source really digs into his leadership then.
What's a key insight the source offers about him during that crisis?
Well, one really compelling point is that Lincoln didn't just save the Union, he fundamentally changed what it even meant.
How so?
He took what many saw as just like a practical agreement between states and transformed it into this idea of an indivisible nation bound by a moral duty against slavery. And he used wartime powers in ways nobody had before to make that happen. It was a profound reshaping of American identity, of justice itself.
Decades roll by, the country gets through that internal division, but then faces massive global threats. And the source points to Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR.
Right, the 32nd president, leading the U.S. through two enormous crises, the Great Depression and World War II, plus ushering in the New Deal.
Revolutionary reforms, really.
Absolutely, and this connects to a bigger theme, Roosevelt showed how much the government's role could expand to tackle huge societal economic problems.
A legacy still debated today, for sure.
No doubt. But his leadership in those incredibly turbulent times showed this amazing willingness to innovate, to adapt the whole structure of the nation just to survive and eventually thrive again.
Okay, and the final figure our source highlights is fascinating because he wasn't a president. Martin Luther King Jr.
A truly towering figure in American leadership, though. A key leader of the civil rights movement, using nonviolent resistance against racial discrimination.
What does the source emphasize about his approach?
What really stands out is that King's nonviolent direct action wasn't just a moral position, though it certainly was that. It was also incredibly strategic.
How so?
It forced the ugliness of segregation onto national television screens. It created this visual confrontation that compelled the federal government to step in ways that maybe traditional politics hadn't managed before.
So even outside traditional office, his impact was immense.
Absolutely profound. He reshaped the legal landscape, the social landscape, demanding a truer democracy for all citizens.
So, wow. We've covered a lot. 5 incredible leaders, establishing the nation, navigating civil war, expanding territory, guiding through global crises, championing civil rights.
A huge range of impacts definitely shaped the America we know.
It really makes you think.
It does. And maybe that leads to a question for you, the listener. Thinking about these 5 very different legacies, what unifying qualities, if any, do you think define a truly quintessential American leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. And which of their contributions looking back now resonates most powerfully with you today? Something to ponder.